Hello to all the live participants in the Mining Law Summit for 2022 and those who watch the recording later. This conversation, this session joins two enterprises. One is the Global Mining Law and Policy Center, which has hosted the Mining Summit, which has built an extraordinary set of courses, graduate level courses, both for lawyers and non-lawyers in our Master of Legal Studies program. Hats off always to John Lacey, without whom we would not have the Mining Summit, the mining program, or the other interesting academic and policy work in this area. It's really been great. Thank you, John. Running separately, but actually for even longer than the Global Mining Law and Policy Program, has been a discussion here at Arizona among several scholars, starting with Laura Lopez Hoffman and me, and then others along the way, about NEPA and the ability to bring this incredible 50-year-old plus statute into the modern era. Its importance in environmental decision-making, the challenges, both political policy and practical challenges around this statute, and the chance to bring tools of computer science, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and modern environmental science and decision-making to bear and make a structure even more effective. And so this conversation today is going to join the work on that project, NEPA Access, with the conversation at this year's Mining Law Summit. To say a little bit more about NEPA Access and the briefest of introductions to NEPA, which we hope and assume anyone involved in the mining industry or in any other large enterprise with significant impacts on land, water, and the environment would already be familiar with. Let me introduce the PI for the project, my close friend and colleague, Laura Lopez Hoffman.
Thank you, Mark. And John, when you hear this, thank you very much for including NEPA Access in this event and for organizing the event. I like to think of, I guess, let me introduce myself and step back. I'm an environmental scientist by training. I have a PhD in environmental science. And so I tend to see the world a little bit differently than perhaps my colleagues who are lawyers. So when I think of NEPA as an experiment with two hypotheses. The first being that using a science-based decision-making process can lead to better environmental outcomes. And the second hypothesis is that when the government enters into a give and take with citizens, better environmental outcomes, or there will be better outcomes for the environment and for people. And so as a trained scientist who used to do experiments out in the field, when I began to really look into environmental review in the US and became aware of the fact that NEPA is a big process, a knowledge generating process, and yet there was very little information about it, about how well it works. And the flip side of that is if you want to make something work better, then you need to study it and you kind of need to know where things need to be improved. And so as a scientist who works with data, I thought, and into conversations with Mark, we really got to get some data on NEPA, on how well it's performing, and also to make all of the knowledge that's generated in environmental review available for people like some of our colleagues who do environmental review for consulting companies, to make it easier for them to do their work. And so that is really the goal of NEPA Access. And I'm very happy to say that some of our early users have been working in the mining field, and we're getting feedback that by putting data and information at their fingertips, they can do better work. We're building NEPA Access, and we like to call it a knowledge, discovery, and engagement platform. So in order to answer the question of how well is NEPA working or how can we improve it, you need to look not just at one process, but multiple processes and compare them. Compare processes across agencies or in different states or in different types of actions. in order to do a project better, it's also helpful to be able to go in and see what happened with this kind of project in different locations, or what kinds of projects have been done in this area, what were the concerns of the stakeholders, what worked and what didn't work. All of this information is actually NEPA documents. NEPA documents are a treasure of information about the kinds of scientific analyses that have been done, the approaches to stakeholder outreach, and other kinds of information. And so NEPA Access is knowledge. We're taking the information that's in EISs and connecting it and making it accessible, enabling knowledge. And then we're a discovery platform because we're allowing you to do these comparisons across agencies, across action types, to discover new things about how NEPA is working or ways that it can be improved. Ultimately, our vision is for NEPA Access to be an engagement platform. So someday it would be nice to have a one-stop shop for all things NEPA, where an interested stakeholder could go and find information about projects in their area. And so knowledge, discovery, and engagement are our three goals with NEPA Access.
I'll introduce myself briefly first. My name is Lean. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Natural Resources and the Environment here at the University of Arizona, and I'm a policy scientist. So I study environmental policy and how policy works to produce outcomes. So many of the things that Laura discussed about NEPA that we would like to know, these are things that people in my field would see as kind of testable hypotheses that we can use empirical data to try to understand what is the effect of NEPA and that public engagement process on outcomes. Or many of the questions people have about NEPA that you hear about, does it delay processes? Does it make it take longer for us to approve projects like mines or other infrastructure? We don't have good answers to that because we haven't had the data available to us. And that's really where NEPA Access comes in. In the past, we know that there's a lot of NEPA documentation out there. There's a lot of EISs and other supporting documents that go into those EISs, but we haven't been able to bring all those things together in one place in a way that allows us to look at the whole rather than the parts.
Aaron, thank you. We've done this introduction at a fairly high level, but it's our intent, as you've heard, not only to do research, but to improve and study a very real and important process. And joining us today is Jim Tress, someone who is not only an expert in NEPA, but representing clients and working with projects, has lived with and worked with NEPA, he and his colleagues, for a long time. So Jim, before we jump in on NEPA, would you like to tell our participants more about your own background?
Thank you, Mark. I'd be happy to. My name is Jim Tress. I'm one of the founding partners of Westland Resources, and we're an engineering and environmental consulting firm, and we have been involved in NEPA and regulatory programs that are allied with NEPA since our inception, and it's been part of my career since I got out of grad school. I went to grad school to be a scientist and didn't know that I'd actually be reading legal briefs to understand how to do my job. And one of the things about NEPA, it's only a 7-page law, but there's 50 years of case law and handbooks and guidance documents and guidelines and agency decisions and appeals that actually determine how it's going to be applied. The thing that intrigues me the most about this project and why I'm really happy to participate in this discussion is that there isn't one spot where you can get all that data pulled together and understand. I'm still struck by the fact that I go out and I'm working on a project and I'm meeting with multiple agencies, and the level of NEPA skill and knowledge and how it's involved and what is the proper application and determining what the scope of analysis is highly variable within and between agencies. And it has a huge effect on your project and how you can execute your project. And so a tool like this, gaining access to that universe of information, particularly with the modern data tools that you guys are talking about, is something that would really, really enhance, I think, the application of NEPA, which is nothing more than a mandate to plan. to plan not only in consideration of the economics of a project, the technical capabilities of doing a project a certain way, but also considering the effects of the project on the human environment. It is still one of the most important environmental regulatory constructs that the country has developed.
Yeah, but Jim and Laura, I think I have a question for both of you, which is, how could it be that we're 50 plus years into this statute, which is a mandate to plan? It's one of the best known and most important understandings, insights about NEPA, which has been true for a long time, is it has no particular substantive weight or directions. It is a process-based statute. But here we are. So, Jim, from your standpoint, I'm interested in, given the importance and scale of the decisions that NEPA triggers, how could it be that we're 50 plus years in, and yet agencies have such great expertise? There isn't this common assessment. And Laura, one of the things that brought you into this project was precisely that puzzle. So both as a cutting edge practitioner and scholar, I think it might be helpful for our audience to hear, how could that be true?
I like to say that when NEPA was passed, it was way ahead of its time. And then over the years, it got behind the time. So NEPA was passed in 1969, signed into law on January 1st, 1970. The internet had just started in 1969, and most people probably didn't even know that it existed until the late 80s. We didn't have the World Wide Web until the late 80s. We didn't have the Lucene search capacity that runs all sorts of search engines until the 90s. And then natural language processing, which is this artificial intelligence, machine learning approach that can turn text into data. And so it can churn through 1,000-page NEPA documents, turn that into text, and then help people find exactly what they need. And so we've had, so the flip side is we had the internet, since 69. We've had the World Wide Web since the 80s. We've had some of these things for 20 or so years. And so it's now time to get NEPA caught up. That is the data science story. It was ahead of its time, and then it fell behind the times. And I think I'll turn over to Jim, why didn't it get caught up earlier?
Maybe I'll focus on, why do people have such different perspectives of what NEPA's mandate is? And I think that comes back to human nature. It is, we all bring our own internal biases to the decisions and to the processes that we get involved in. And we tend, as a group, particularly when people are as busy as they are, this is how I did it the last time, I'm going to do it this time now. It worked last time. Why won't it work this time? The last time it wasn't a controversial project. This time it is. And now you find out that maybe the way you've been doing it didn't align with the way the courts have been interpreting this. But that can take time to do. People are busy. It takes a lot of time to find data to try to keep up on this program, and having the data in one spot makes a difference.
Let's talk about that, what the pain points are, but also whether having data and the ability to analyze and use it, not just the data, but tools to actually begin to understand what is a similar project, what is a similar issue in other projects. Do different agencies handle a similar kind of issue differently? The cumulative impacts, all of these different dimensions of analysis. We hear you're welcoming the kind of work we're doing, but given exactly what you said, given the expertise that's settled, people have worked through what their job is, whether it's within an agency, a consultancy, a company, a nonprofit, an environmental group, there's sort of a role to play. Can we, do you think, break through that by the right kind of data and tools?
The short answer is yes. I think we work with a lot of folks, very different perspectives and values, and a lot of times some of those are in conflict, but at its center, people are generally good. I'll just say that out loud. And that when given the ability to make the right decision, we will make the right decision. The decision in NEPA that I'm talking about isn't the final agency action that's selected. What alternative are they picking? Are they picking the applicant's proposed alternative, or the one developed by the agencies over here, or the no action alternative that's mandated by NEPA? the right decision that underscores whether the NEPA process is being done right or not is, what is the scope of analysis? What is the question? The classic example of that, and some of the folks undoubtedly that will be watching this tape have experienced it, is the small handle test. Okay, I have a very small element of federal jurisdiction on my project. What is the scope of the federal review and authority to influence what is otherwise a private action on private property? That's huge. And yet I've been, I'll name the agencies that, now ongoing conflict. Fish and Wildlife Service takes a much broader view of the federal scope of review than the Corps of Engineers under their Clean Water Act program. A project like this that brings all these decisions together and makes more transparent the nature of these kinds of actions can be a leveling agent, right? It can help level the field and make something and bring a common framework for discussion.
So I think I hear you saying that the potential exists for a more optimal, a better, optimal maybe too strong term, but a better set of outcomes from the standpoint of multiple actors, whether it be the agency, the proponent of an action, an opponent of an action, that access to better information can indeed produce, as Laura suggested, wiser outcomes. So let's think through that a little bit from the standpoint of a large mining project. Can we start to wrestle with the kind of information? There may be opponents and proponents. There may be agreement or disagreement. I suppose one way to think about this is, what are the pain points? Where have you found in your professional work finding at large difficulty helping a client, difficulty working with an agency to get through a particular issue? You've identified one example is the federal jurisdiction. What else have been these pain points or barriers to resolution?
I think fundamentally it's defining that scope of analysis and getting everybody centered on what is the process we are going to go through and execute to get something done. And it's interesting because my training was in botany and ecological sciences, but I find that the policy side of it, the legal side of it, is what determines how these things get done. And the pain point is getting to that scope of analysis. What is a sufficient cumulative impact assessment? What are the connected actions that need to be analyzed and evaluated in the project? How has that been done before? How have they been challenged in the past? Is it an indirect effect? For those that aren't in NEPA, it sounds like angels dancing on pinheads. I had a client that accused me of worrying about that once. But those are the things that define the scope of analysis and review. Nothing will ever bring opposing sides together in agreement if I don't want the mine project because of fundamental beliefs that I have, views that I have. No amount of analysis is going to change my mind. But for me, one of the things that happens is we get into this, analysis paralysis, if you will, because making a decision, the fear of litigation becomes so hard. Those are the pain points. Do I have enough information to make a decision? And if you can provide examples of that and how it's worked and have it cross over all the different agencies that can be involved in NEPA, I think you can get us to the point where we are making decisions, which is what NEPA is about. We need to make decisions. There's nothing worse than just having it going on and on and on. And you get to the end of it, and somebody says, well, you didn't do it right. And now you have to get into a legal dispute because of a sentence, if you would, in a document, in the way a no action alternative was treated.
So, Jim, Laura, in her welcome and introduction, framed the idea of knowledge discovery and engagement. You've talked some about the potential for NEPA access to better inform, to better provide information, and we're just at the front end of building the full engagement. But it would be very helpful to hear from you about where the pain points have been, where the delays, where the uncertainty, again, working with clients, working through projects, and how might NEPA access address that? In other words, what kinds of knowledge, not just the underlying information, we know the deep and broad set of documents. Ultimately, we want to have the full process from notice through final decision, including EAs and everything else in there. That's our data. But we can add other kinds of data. But sort of where have been the pain points, and help us think through both how NEPA access can and how you hope ultimately it would enable your work, the work of your clients, and the broader goal of decisions about significant projects affecting the human environment.
I think it's a great question. I think that for an agency decision maker, when they are sitting down and looking at this project, a usually controversial mining project, they're going, I went to school to be a forester. I didn't sign up to sign off on this and get sued, right? And so for them to have that broad and deep pool of knowledge, when I talked about leveling, it was, oh, this is how it was handled here. This is how it was handled here. This is how this group did it. And this is what worked and didn't work. And this aligns with what my staff's experience is and what I'm hearing from the third-party consultant, et cetera. But if all we have are the documents, the actual NEPA documents, and I think Laura said it goes much broader than that in terms of what happens, is that gathering what I would love to see in a product like this is having the whole gamut of here was the scoping materials that were set out, here was the document, here was the letters that appealed the decision, here was the appeal deciding officer's reasoning for rejecting the appeal. Here's why he accepted the appeal and sent it back. That end part is really, really interesting to me. That's where you can look at that experience and understand, whether it's just at an appeal level or it's gone to court. Okay, why did they decide that? What did we need to do differently? And I alluded to it earlier. It could be a sentence, one sentence that you rewrite that all of a sudden gives you a completely different outcome in that process. And so that full spectrum of knowledge is what I think we're screaming for. Gathering that data, getting that data is very difficult. It takes time. We don't always have time to do it. And not just us, our clients, the agencies, it's hard to do. So for me, it's that full spectrum that matters in terms of understanding what worked or didn't work. There are examples on mining projects where I went to ski areas and read about how they dealt with the Religious Freedom Act. Okay, that's a scoping issue. How was that dealt with? Being able to see how that was dealt with, not only in their decision, but how it was dealt with when it was challenged. And why did it stand up? And why didn't it? That's what would create confidence in the decision maker to push stuff forward.
As I mentioned earlier, NEPA, what we've done is we've collected all, not all, we've collected about 60% of the EISs that have been finished or completed in the last 20 years. So going back to 2000, we have every single EIS that has been publicly available. So we've scraped the web and we have every single EIS that's been publicly available, final and draft, and all the supplementary information for both the final and draft. And then we have connected them. So sometimes you get a draft that has one title, and for the same process, the final will have another title. It's very confusing. So we've used artificial intelligence and the power of undergraduate students to connect all of these. So for about 66% of all of the EISs completed in the last 20 years, you can go to NEPA Access, you can find the draft and final. Sometimes we have a link to NOI, we have sometimes information about ROD. And it allows you to look at that process, see how it changed over time. And the other thing that we've done is we've mapped these to at least the county or even better, the city. And then we're extracting a little bit more information about the agencies. What Jim was just laying out was a great blueprint for what NEPA Access would like to do in the future. There's only so much that we can do to use natural language processing to go backwards and artificial intelligence to go backwards and kind of extract information and make sense of things in the past. But one thing that we can do, because we've thought through how should the NEPA data be organized better, we've done a lot of thinking. And so we can offer suggestions for how one could structure a platform where all of these different kinds of points of decision that Jim was talking about could be organized by process and made comparable across different agencies, across different action types. You could pull up for the town you're interested in. And it was just a wonderful blueprint. Thank you, Jim. And that's our goal, to be prospective as well as retrospective and help make the process more data friendly and more organized.
So, Laura, that's to illuminate that, Jim, I'd like to move, if we can, to two questions. Sort of one is, and Laura, you've started to take note of this. What is it about mining projects, especially big mining projects? So not the existing mine and the modification, though that can be controversial or not, but new or major mining projects. What is distinctive about NEPA and decision-making, agency decision-making for mining projects against the variety of other projects that you see? And then second, I would love if we could begin to move toward the engagement dimension, Laura, that you mentioned as we think going forward, because you've mentioned Religious Freedom Act, issues of consultation and engagement with Indian nations or other indigenous groups, but of course the range of issues, urban, rural, on public lands, interfacing with private lands. The range of issues for input and engagement is so vast. So two things. What do we need to know, having worked with clients on big mining projects, about here is what is distinctive or critical or central for these kind of projects? And then going forward, how do we potentially use our platform to improve and deepen engagement? Because feedback is so much an inherent part of the NEPA process.
I think maybe to get to the first question, what's unique about mining projects? When you think about the scale of projects that are considered in NEPA and levels of disturbance, mines are significant. They alter a landscape. They're an essential part of our economy. And there's that bumper sticker that was, hey, if it wasn't grown, it was mined. And that's never changed. That's real. But that landscape level change elicits a visceral reaction in people. You taking it and turning the earth inside out and creating great piles and changing topography, and you're not doing this on geologic scales, you're doing this in pretty quick order, right? And that causes real visceral reactions in people. And I think it's something that Laura said, people want to be heard. So in the mining projects that we've been involved in, you're never going to change everybody's mind about a project, ever. You're just not going to. But the outcomes can shift if they know they've been heard. Whether it's tribal engagement, real deep tribal engagement, community engagement about the issues of boom bust economies. Those are the things. Above all else, I think people want to be heard, and I think the framers of NEPA understood that, and that's why one of the foundations of NEPA is engaging the public in the process. And so having a platform that allows them to not only see about their project possibly, but also what's been done before can help make that engagement, I think, more meaningful.
How else can we illuminate that engagement that says, get from your standpoint, what are the challenges now if there are citizen groups involved or large numbers of citizens, if there's a range of comments that come in ranging from a large number of shorter comments on a particular issue, some comments attaching studies, assessments, referring to literature. What is the, again, from the user standpoint, taking engagement seriously as you must to satisfy the process requirements to help support your clients through to the end of a project. What can we learn, and how might we help that engagement process from the standpoint of people who want to speak, from the standpoint of people who want to respond, ultimately from the agency in terms of their taking account of citizen input?
I think some of the data tools that y'all have talked about in terms of the artificial intelligence, in terms of being able to, I'm not even sure the proper term that you use, Laura, but being able to machine read comments and help to process them would be a huge benefit for some of these big projects. It's a valuable tool. It could shorten up some of that scoping time, maybe eliminate some human error. I still remember when people used their calculator and then did it longhand to make sure the calculator was right. But I think we're progressing. So, those kinds of things could be very, very helpful in terms of the kinds of data tools that you're working on, just to be able to process all of the myriad documents to start to make them accessible across all that information. Some of the tools that come out of that could be very useful for NEPA practitioners from a scoping perspective.
So the projects themselves are often massive and significant, and as you've pointed out, transform the earth. I mean, above ground, below ground, these are very large scale projects. But that's a very interesting, important point, is because they're large scale, the number of people who might have an interest or might be affected, the number of groups, organizations, entities, jurisdictions,
Yes.
Government agencies can be very large. And so this issue of complexity keeps coming up, right? That decisions that trigger NEPA are, if not always, very often complex. And then the question, Laura, for the NEPA Access team, and then for people listening to this, is how do we use these tools to help? And Jim, I think your point that the natural language processing can help organize the comments to highlight what is different, to highlight strengths of views. What are people focusing in on? What are the priorities? What is not just a raw count, right? A raw count, as Laura points out, can be done by hand, whether it's done by undergraduate or citizens. But to begin to get to a more subtle and accurate analysis of what is being expressed, and to see when the outliers are there, outliers in terms of views or information provided, to be able to address them is very interesting. Laura, do you have thoughts about how NEPA Access might approach that challenge?
So so Jim was talking about using machine learning and natural language processing to evaluate comments. And so a lot of us are familiar, say, with movie reviews or Yelp, where people say, I loved that movie, I hated that restaurant. Those are very easy kinds of comments for a machine to categorize. The kinds of comments that we receive or that we look at when we're on the NEPA Access project, specifically about mining, could be something as different as one comment which says, that mountain is just a pile of rocks. Mining is our hope and future. Another comment could say, that mountain isn't just a pile of rocks, it's our hope and future. And if you ran that through the same algorithm that does Yelp reviews, you would get the response that both are the same, that they're both saying the same thing, and obviously they're very different. And so we have to use the most cutting edge machine learning with natural language processing and an approach called sentiment analysis to evaluate those. And that's something that we could do. We could, with machine learning, just look at all of the comments, differentiate how many of them are form letters, how many of them say substantive things, what kinds of things they say, what kinds of stances or opinions that they take. So that's just one on the machine learning aspect. And then the next thing is back to my opening comments, our third goal, which is the engagement. We can be a one-stop shop, or we would love to be a one-stop shop in the future, so that when there's a process going on in a comment period, the comments could go right into the database and people could be getting the analysis live. It would make it easy for the general public to know this is just where you go to do this kind of work. It would be easy for the agencies because they wouldn't have to then, process the data later. And so it would really, I think it would help this engagement, and it would help us test the hypothesis in NEPA. Is public engagement leading to better outcomes? Are people, even if they're not happy with an outcome, when they've been included, when they've been listened to, when they've had a chance to offer ideas for scoping, even if it's not the outcome that they wanted, do they have more trust in the process? These are the goals that NEPA laid out. I think we need to figure out how to see how NEPA is working and help the process so that it can achieve these goals.
Yeah. So Jim, NEPA, as you pointed out, is a very short statute, and Laura, as you and Jim have both noted, sort of an optimistic one, right? It had a positive vision, a lot of bipartisan support at the time. Jim, in thinking about down the road, and we've done a lot of work, but we have a long way to go. And part of what I hope everyone is hearing is that we haven't come to you, Jim, or to this mining summit or to anyone else saying we've got the answer. We think we've got a path to improve and work, of course, at a project. But what I wanted to ask you is, what are the 2 or 3 kinds of issues that sit outside of the formal NEPA analysis? In other words, what do you find in mining projects in particular that should be understood or taken into account? It might be a kind of information that we should add to the system. It might be a source of commentary outside of formal comments in comment processes, right? Where else should we be looking or thinking about to understand the scientific, the social, maybe the political setting or framework in which agencies will make decisions? Because over time, we're hoping this platform, as Laura says, one-stop shop, this platform is useful. And if people have to go outside of it for critical information, we haven't achieved that end.
That's a great question. I think you said something that resonates. All decisions are political. There's 2 of us in the room. There's a political decision to be made, right? And so how do you take that give and take that happens in a political process that's being carried out against the framework of a legal mandate and capture all the nuances of what happens? I'm not sure it's possible. I think, I talked earlier about leveling, and if we have a common framework of understanding, I may not like it, but I understand this is what the scope of analysis will be, then I can comment based on that. And I think the intangible thing that a tool like this has the potential to create is that ability to create that level field of understanding. And I'm not sure I got to your question, but really that seems to be, for me, the benefit here. And that would address those things that happen outside of the regulatory process, if you will.
I think this would be a good time to toss this to Aaron and ask him to reflect on how NEPA Access can help with the leveling. I love that term. I'm not as bold to use it. I'm using engagement, but I'm glad that Jim is using that.
Yeah, so I think if we back, and so what is in NEPA Access, right? So what are the products that are there currently, and what do we hope to have in the future? So we have, as Laura mentioned, this archive or database of EISs, but it's not just that, these EISs are there, it's the entire processes that are there. And from a technical perspective, that wasn't a trivial problem putting those things together, right? That takes actually quite a bit of complex machine learning to take things that don't have a serial number or any sort of identifying characteristic across a process, from NOI to draft to final to record of decision, putting those things together so people can see them as a unit, to see how something developed, evolved from a draft to a final based on public comments, what was done to improve an analysis or change analysis, alter alternatives based on what that public engagement process looked like, and then producing a final result in that record of decision. That's a difficult process, and so we've pulled that together. And then we've also been able to place these things geographically. So you can see on a map, you can, I want to know what's happening in my community or what has happened in the past in my community. You can search by the county you live in, the city you live in, the state you live in, and find the EISs that have happened in that place around this particular project type like mining, or any EIS that has happened in those places, to be able to see the different types of information that are in them, different types of analyses that are done. And so when we talk about leveling the playing field, what this does is this provides access to information for everybody, right? So it's not just people that have access to a law library, or people that have access, through a consulting firm or through the government to an archive of EISs that they've worked on or that the agency has worked on, so that they can pull together some data that's helpful to them. And so the whole, everybody involved, everybody affected by an action, by a mining project, by any other type of project, can go and they can find that information. They can see what has been done in the past with mining EISs, and what can I learn from that to help me engage in this process that's happening in my community now. How do I understand the analysis that's being done by Westland Resources on this project versus what's been done in the past on other projects? And how can I use that to inform how I engage here? Should I be asking them to look at something differently because I can see it was done in this mining project before, and I liked how that process turned out, right? So you can use these tools to start putting things together and understanding in a way that is really difficult for citizens who don't have experience with the NEPA process necessarily, right? They haven't been engaged in this for a long time, aren't doing it as a career. They're coming to this because they're concerned about an issue that's happening in their community, and they want to understand it better.
So let's join issue on that. Jim's talked about the complexity. You, Aaron, have talked about the complexity. Laura has talked about the complexity, by which I mean the volume of documents, the multiple stages of the procedure. Jim, I'm interested if Westland and for your clients, you feel like as part of the NEPA process, you're speaking to the public. That's different from responding to public comments, right? And speaking to the agency. And so, Aaron, I'd come back to you and to Jim and I'd say, even if people had access to a law library, legal documents are dense. If they had access to scientific documents, not everyone has the PhD and the training, the time, the patience, literally the ability to work through those documents. What might we do on the platform? I want to avoid the word simplify, because that to me, it isn't take information out. How often, Jim, do you and Westland think we're speaking to the public, and to do that, we need to frame or present our evidence in a different way? And then for everyone, how can the tool help do that? I'm thinking now about fundamental communication and engagement with the public.
Well, if I could start on that one of the things I was told first when I started getting into NEPA was, you have to write. I'm working with a bunch of scientists and engineers, and they're going to write at the level of science and engineering that they're doing. But the NEPA practitioner at the outset is communicating to the public. The NEPA document is just the compendium, it's the compilation of the decision process. It is not the analysis itself. It's laying out a summary. It's structured intentionally to provide a summary for the interested person of how that decision was reached. And so they can read chapter 1 and chapter 2, which should be short. Often they're not. And the summary at the end of chapter 2 and go, okay, I understand this decision. No, I don't know if I agree with that. I can go to chapters 3 and 4 or the combined chapters 3 and 4 and read more about that analysis. From there, I have to dig deeper and go into the actual scientific reports that were compiled to write that summary. And so it's just, you're going deeper and deeper in the process. But the intention of most of the NEPA documents that I've read or have talked to other practitioners about or prepared, we are speaking to the public. And so you need to start from that level, but have the ability to drill down deeper and deeper into that technical issue if you want to.
Yeah, and so we talk a lot about user experience when we're designing a platform like this, right? So it's not just a website. You don't just throw some stuff up on the internet and expect people to use it and it's all going to be fine. You actually have to work with people that you hope to be using the tools you're developing and asking them, does this work for you? How would you like to see this different than it is now? What would make it easier for you to interact? And so that's part of what we've been doing through the last few years in the development of the platform to where it is now, and what we will hopefully continue to be able to do in the future as we add new tools, new features to the platform to help with this engagement aspect. And one of the things that you do in that is you find the ways to appropriately abstract the data, right? The real data never goes away, right? The original documents, and that's what you're just talking about. You can drill down as deep as you want, but at this, as you go up, you also want to be able to abstract some of that data. So where have projects taken place in the past? Can I just see this simply on a map? There's a reason Google Maps, everybody loves it, right? Because it's easy to interact with. You can find what you're looking for super, super quickly. So can we do that for EISs? Can we put a project on a map and show you where its area of impacts are? Provide some basic information by extracting that text out of the EIS. So you don't have to read the EIS, but you can see what this project type was. You can see its basic impacts, its basic area affected, some of the other projects that are happening in the area. And you can see this, you can abstract it really quickly, you can understand it, and then you're like, okay, I want to know more about this. And then you can start drilling down through that. And having that experience worked out for the user so that they can get to the data quickly and easily, see that snapshot if that's all they want, or start drilling down if they want more. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that, working on that to make these data as accessible as possible.
So Jim, NEPA has been the subject of political debate, both partisan and sort of in the political sphere. We're at an interesting moment of change. We're having this conversation before the upcoming election, but this really isn't about a date in November, a week from now. I'm really talking about a larger point about discussions about, for example, the mining and national security, mining and new energy systems, mining and the transformation of the economy. So mining as an industry, but then decision-making about mines, of which NEPA is central, are there. Speaking now to other consultants, to the mining companies or other clients that you have or might work with, how might they approach or understand? And as you've taken a very optimistic view, you've engaged us before, you're here to speak with us today, and we appreciate it. Is there something to say to people who come in perhaps skeptical about either the history of NEPA and how it's been applied, or flip that, believing that the purpose of NEPA is to put up a wall, not to reach outcomes? Is there a way of beginning to speak across a broader and skeptical view of NEPA? We've come in with this hopeful, historical view. You've come in as a practitioner and someone who works in this world. Is there a way to talk to people who either say NEPA is the best thing and I don't want to improve it, or it's the worst thing and it needs to go away? Is there a way we, as a set of scholars, you as an engaged practitioner, can help change that dialogue?
I think it comes down to efficiency in a decision-making process, and certainty. And, and it can be made too simple. You will finish this EA in 6 months. Well, okay, that means the agency knows it's going to take a year. So the first 6 months of the work on the project is going to be outside of the official EA period. Okay, have you gained anything there? No. I think for me, and just in talking to my clients, certainty and understanding. I know what the process is. I may not know what the outcome will be. I know what the steps are. I know what the framework of the decision is going to be based on. I know how I can modify or develop my project to address those issues. And I know that it's going to take some period of time. And depending on the complexity of project, it's going to take a little more because it just takes that long to pull the data together to answer the questions. But it's going to take some time. It's when there's no end in sight. It's when, for a sentence in a no action alternative, and I bet you somebody in this audience will know what project I'm talking about, that there's a 10-year litigation cycle. We think NEPA takes a long time. There's all kinds of things that were really beneficial that didn't happen in that 10 years for the environment while that decision was waiting to be made. So how do you create certainty and understanding? And that's where, when I talked about the leveling, when I talk about the notion that there's access to understand where the risks and the pitfalls are and what you do to address those, that's how you can address the process. I think the public, you see it around the world, the public will participate in decision-making processes. The internet guarantees that. How can we make it efficient and not make it this time suck that can destroy project budgets, that had me thinking, I wonder if my children's children will be the ones that finish this project, right? I mean, that's almost how it feels sometimes.
So when I hear a goal for both efficiency, and sometimes it's a goal for wiser outcomes, taking account of environmental justice issues, for example, something which has come to the fore as a major theme. It's been part of the NEPA process for some time. One of the concepts that I hear us discussing, and you discussing the bridges that, is this idea of transparency. Transparency about the process, transparency about the views different actors take, transparency about the geographic, the footprint, who is involved, who could be involved, who should be involved. So I see the idea of transparency, accessibility, understandability, as you noted right up front, a process that helped get people onto an agreement of what the issues were, not what the particular outcome will be, but that joint issue more clearly in the beginning would then help, we at least have reason to believe would help, certainly as in your role, give the hope of, again, efficiency and wisdom. This world, which we're optimists, where we believe that science and engagement can produce better outcomes, which of course goes back 50 plus years to the very text of NEPA itself. Laura, Jim talked about the importance of efficiency, but he didn't just rest on the word. He talked about the desire to have a reasonable understanding of the amount of time that a project will take, a reasonable understanding, given the nature of a project, of what must be addressed. Early on, he said, if we could frame and join issues, that would help me and my clients. And ultimately, he said, he believes lead to better outcomes. And then at the end, he again came back to this point of of time and cost, not substance, not the actual decision, but the ability to get to a decision. What have we learned thus far, and how might NEPA access help on those issues?
So thank you for that question, Jim. So I heard two things in the question. One is your clients just want to understand the process and have some information, be able to predict how long it would take. And the other's just understanding like where in the process things could be improved. So we have NEPA Access has been working on both of those points. So on the second point, which is understanding in general how long processes take, this figure here is from testimony that the team put together for a U.S. Senate hearing in June 2020, and we showed this graph in our testimony of the length of time projects have taken over the last 12, 15 years. So the average is 4.7 years. And if you look at this graph here, you see that it has a really long tail, so that there's a couple projects out there that have taken 24 years, 20 to 21. The maximum here is 24. The average is 4.4, but the median is 3.6. That means half of all projects take 3.6 years or less. 75% of projects take 6 years or less. So one thing that the NEPA Access team can do, obviously, is put together a graph like these, but then to go in and to look at the characteristics of the projects that take less time and more time, and understand by looking at that what the features are, what the conditions are that lead to more efficiency or longer processes. And not only can we show graphs like this, but our business analytics team here at the University Eller School of Management are using cutting edge things called wide and deep learning predictive business analytics to look at a whole host of different factors about the process, the agency, the cooperating agency, the location, the type of action, to be able to predict how long projects will take based on various characteristics. And so those are two kinds of things, just offering basic data, helping people understand that the average is higher than the median because there's these heavy outliers, long outliers, and also being able to predict processes, predict time lengths of processes.
Great. So Laura, I certainly hear you talking about how we can learn what has happened. I also hear Jim talking about, can NEPA Access in the future help make decisions even more efficient? And part of what you're saying is that both critics and supporters of NEPA may react to outliers, not to the norm. But I think one of our hopes is that a good, clear digital platform can enable more efficient and wiser and fairer decision-making across these key decisions.
Right. So I heard Jim saying that they wanted sort of an understanding of the process. And so we can use analytics to predict how long processes will take. But we can also go in and figure out what are the factors that are maybe causing barriers in certain locations. And hopefully by having some things automated, having some processes streamlined, enabling a practitioner. We've talked to a user who works for AECOM, so a big consulting company, and she said that she used to have to send emails out to all of her colleagues in her company and then outside the company to get information about projects in certain locations. She feels like she's already doing more comprehensive and more efficient environmental reviews for her company after having just had NEPA Access for a year. And so that opportunity for people to not reinvent the wheel, to go in and look, I think is really helpful. We can help regulators go in and understand the process more, understand what parts of the process are slowing things down. And so I think just having information at your fingertips is the way to make better decisions. Sometimes things are difficult on anecdote, but when you can make informed decisions based on data, that's when you really know what's going on. And that's when you can really make things faster and better and with better outcomes.
Laura, thank you from Germany, where you're on the German government fellowship, well-earned there, but continuing in your role as a great PI and leader for all of us in this project. Jim, we appreciate the earlier thoughts you've had at the project, and then today joining us for this conversation. You're not only enormously expert in the field, but you are representing here the large user group in and out of government, in industry and elsewhere, who it is our goal and purpose to engage with. And so thank you. As always, your suggestions and comments have been insightful. Aaron is another colleague and principal on the project. And then it's a large group of scholars. It's a huge group of students, undergraduates and graduates. Really, one of the striking things about this project is it doesn't sit easily in a traditional academic discipline. It sits in the world. And let me again, John, thank you and everyone involved with the Global Mining Law and Policy Program for inviting us to be a part of the workshop this year, and invite anyone who listens and hears this and says, that's interesting, I agree, I disagree, you're missing a point, I've got an idea. We could not be more welcoming of input while this project, which has a deep foundation, but we hope and expect to continue and advance for years to achieve the complex ends we've discussed. I invite everyone to engage with us and weigh in. Again, Jim, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start on the homepage of NEPAaccess.org with a simple search. We found that by designing this for the simplest user, for instance, a common citizen wanting to find out about a controversial project in their area, we also make this most usable for more sophisticated users. So I'm going to make this an exact phrase for copper mine, and we have 175 results, which I can filter by, let's say, state. I'm going to filter by Arizona, since that's where we are, and zoom in on the map. Can also select a state on the map and have it show up in the filters. We're in Pima County here. I'm going to select Pima County, and I've got 7 matches. So date range is also available, and document type. So we can see Rosemont Copper Project comes up first in the search results, and that's actually the project that we've heard about on the news and we want to find out more about. We can show or hide these text snippets, which find our search query words in the document text, since this is a full text search. We can sort by relevance, which we don't need to do here. Relevance is at the top. We can export search results as a Excel file. We can see that this is organized by process with draft, final, and record of decisions in one place. If we select the title, we can go to more details on this process. Agency, cooperating agencies, dates of the different parts of the process, and a timeline. On the right side here, we can download a whole archive of the whole draft EIS, or we can download individual files in PDF form. So I'm going to download the full EIS here, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, panel. That was really excellent, I think, and I particularly appreciate the demonstration at the end. And the question is, where is this access available? In other words, do we go? Is there a particular address of this platform that individuals can go to make this search?
Yeah, let me handle that highly technical question. It is available at nepaaccess.org. The page you saw has been live for a year. We continue, you'll see it says beta because we continue to evolve and update with the team. The project, we're at an interesting time in the project with the new Inflation Reduction Act and other federal priorities focused on permitting reform and decision-making reform. And so looking forward, we hope we've been timely not only for those interested in the mining industry or NEPA generally or other relevant areas, but that we can respond to the moment. But for now, this is up and running. We ask people to sign up just so we know who's using it. There is no cost. It is meant to be publicly and widely accessible, and it continues to evolve.
You know, one of the issues that many of us have seen over the years is the input to the NEPA process from a technical side from the agencies, and particularly from the standpoint that you know, a lot of the really good people within the agencies wind up going to other jobs, and sometimes very quickly. So it's I mean, is there a way to make a judgment on these things, on the technical input?
I'll go ahead and take a shot at that, John. I think that you know, one of the things that we didn't talk about in the panel discussion is very often dealing with a project in Nevada now and talking to the federal agencies involved. 3 people are handling 40 EAs for mine-related projects. That becomes a real limitation to processing these documents and getting these decisions done. Agencies rely strongly on that third-party NEPA contractor support, but it still comes down to sort of probably not very dissimilar from what Mark or others on this call might see in terms of somebody's got to be a final reviewer, and therein lies a bottleneck. So it is an issue in terms of if you're going to mandate outcomes, if you're going to, not the outcome of the decision, but that decisions be made following a process and is not staffed sufficiently, it becomes a problem in and of itself to get it done. And it becomes part of that frustration we were talking about.
Yeah, and as Mark pointed out, that platform is available now. And certainly for those of you on the call, it's probably you can do some experimentation on it to see what you think. And you know, as I'm sure that they would welcome any input from you as to any difficulties in using the platform, because that's how we make things better, is to address particular questions. And you know, I see only one question there, is when the program will be online for public use, and the answer is it's been there, and go check it out.
Yeah, it's been there. It's been getting used. Aaron, I don't know if you want to talk some about the use, and we've been getting a lot of feedback. I hope you could see even in the brief demonstration that we have on our team a user experience expert, along with the data scientists and the environmental scientists and the legal scholars. And we are working very hard with users to make sure we're responding to the questions and needs. So we would welcome input, but it is getting active use now. And as I said, has been, it was publicly announced a year ago. Aaron, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I would just add that, you know, as people use it and we hear feedback from users, we are making changes and updating the platform and improving the platform. So the feedback that we receive from people matters, right? We take that feedback and we try to make the platform more responsive to user needs, easier to use, improving the search functions, improving the data analysis functions. So we really do appreciate the feedback. So if you do get on there and use it and you see some things that would make it easier for you, or missing features that you'd like to see, let us know, and that will be something that we can look at with our development team and see what we can do.
And John, if I could add, I thought Jim's answer was great. And, we see a lot of hope in this project. And as our conversation with Jim earlier that was recorded suggested, I think he and others see the potential. We can't solve all the world's problems, and turnover in agencies is, it is part of the world. But to the extent that all relevant documents and information and decision processes are brought together and accessible, right? To the extent that part of what this project does is, as Laura says, be a one-stop shop. If a new key decision maker is involved, or if others come in, the learning curve, the time we hope to assess, process, and understand the complex decision-making processes, that learning curve will be shortened, right? It's a modest point, but I hope an important one. The better organized information is, the more clear it is, the more, to Jim's point, you can see the outliers, make sure that you're covering and addressing the full range of questions. If consultation is required, has it happened? If it has happened, what have the processes been? What is the record? Just as an illustration. In that sense, we do hope the platform can be helpful, even with the turnover in staff and decision makers within agencies.
Yeah, and going to the idea of consultation, it seems to me that the areas that are sometimes the most difficult is in the process is that certain groups that are required to be consulted were not. And is there a way within the system here to direct that the geographic location to identify who the appropriate parties are for consultation?
Yeah, I think you see all three of us nodding our heads. With good geographic tools that think not only of the direct location of a proposed project, but of the effects, right? With the right science, getting a sense of effects on air or water, transportation, communities, and so forth. The ability then to identify relevant groups or individuals who should be engaged for feedback, we hope will go up. That you saw some of our mapping, and that mapping and the science that underlies it is an important and core part of the project that we're working on now. Again, it's not mechanical that where the effects go. That reflects underlying science or understandings or other projects and analogies that are drawn, and that's the kind of quite complex work that we're doing now. With data science at the core. Some people hear this project and they say, well, that's great. You've gathered documents together. It's a good database. And that's an important piece, but a small part of the larger project and the capabilities we're building.
Sure.
And if I could jump in, I think it builds on the response that Mark clarified the question before, John, and it's very related, okay? In that as you get turnover, as new people learn from experience, having access, a broader access. This is when I talked about leveling in the recorded segment, where somebody can come into an organization, an agency organization. And as this database is built and expanded, look at, okay, what's been done in our area? What has worked? What's been challenged? Where have I had those problems? And they can then make the appropriate decisions with a broader base of knowledge as to how they might proceed that limits risk. When you're limiting that risk, you're limiting the time involved. Okay, the potential for significant delay because of a mistake in scoping, as you talked about, where they didn't reach out to the full parties that needed to be reached out to, and they had to start over again, so to speak. So the tool can have a great ability for providing that leveling of knowledge and access to information to help improve the future decisions, right? History informs our future decisions, and that's sort of what this is looking at.
Good. Well, thank you all for participating. I did see that some of the information that was put out on our schedule is a little bit different than what we're prepared for here. But this particular panel is scheduled to go until 10:30, which is 3 minutes from now. And then we'll pick up with the challenges and opportunities in responsible sourcing. That panel will go until 12:02, and we'll have about until 12:20 for the questions. From 12:20 to 12:40, we'll have a break. 12:40 to 12:50 will be Dean Garzione's presentation, and we'll allow 20 minutes for questions on that until 1:10. And then from 1:10 to 2:10, we'll have the challenges in Indigenous rights advocacy. And then 10 minutes after that for questions. The community relations presentation will begin at 2:15 to 2:50, and we'll allow 15 minutes for questions on that. And then Dr. Ana Bastida's commentary will begin at 3:05 until 4 o'clock with and after 4 o'clock for the questions.
Great. John, so let me just conclude this discussion session by thanking you again and all the participants going forward. The day looks interesting. Thank you to the many people who are online. It's great to see so much current participation. From the standpoint of the NEPA Access team, please do not hesitate to reach out to us if we could do a presentation to a company, a nonprofit, a government agency, to have a conversation. We really welcome and embrace those opportunities. Jim, thank you again both for the recording and joining us today. Aaron and all the folks on the project. This is a great team that has brought the project to this point, and it's really been a pleasure for us to be able to present today. So thank you all.
And thank you, Mark, for providing the opportunity to do it. All right, well, we'll close off this particular session and go on to the sourcing issue.